Hello there, folks, and welcome to our new little podcast that we've got going on. This is Reversing the Hold with me, Matt Powell, aka otherwise known as Mad Dog Maxx. And I've decided to start up this little podcast. As I say, we're calling it Reversing the Hold. And technically speaking, this is kind of like episode 0. We're not going to call this an episode. I'm using this as a bit of a soft run or a soft opening, just to say hello to you guys and tell you kind of what we want to achieve with this little thing. I'm going to answer a few questions in a little bit and talk to you about that. But first of all, I need to tell you about the show and why I'm doing it, or at least you can get in touch and things like that, really. So yeah, we're going to use this podcast to answer some questions and talk about some subjects that maybe you guys want to talk about, really. So we've set up an email address. It's RTHPod at hotmail.com, RTHPod at hotmail.com. RTH is just reversing the whole, so that's easy to remember, really. And that's the email you can get in touch with us with. Or obviously, you can come on Facebook and go on the Mad Dog Maxx profile, or find me, Matt Powell, or preferably go in the PWL fan zone. And just, drop a question or drop a subject. It doesn't have to be a direct question. You can say, Matt, hey, why don't we talk about this, or why don't we talk about that? I'm sure some of you guys got some nice cool wrestling pay-per-views that you remember, or matches, or just questions about that, or whatever, really. It doesn't have to be about wrestling either. There's a lot more to me than just wrestling. Personally, I like reading, I like history, I like conspiracy theories. Well, I better explain that a little bit, actually. I like conspiracy theories, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I believe in all of them. So, I'm not sitting here with a tinfoil hat, thinking that every conspiracy theory is real. I know, 99.9% in my head that the Earth's not flat. But I quite watching documentaries of people that think it is flat, and their justifications for it and their reasoning for it. And I find that very interesting, really. This guy standing on the TV talking about, well, the Earth's flat. And, it's kind of not, but it's very interesting in watching him try to justify it. And people like that, really, they seem quite intelligent and switched on. They're just maybe in the concentrating on the wrong things. Then obviously some conspiracy theories are compelling. I like my ancient aliens theories and all things like that. I think that's so interesting. So yeah, I like reading conspiracy theories. Oddly, I like comic books and geek culture. I like all the well, a lot of, not all of them, the Marvel films and the DC films. And I've been reading comics since I was in my early teens. Really, I've probably been reading comics and been obsessed with that kind of culture for longer than even I've been involved or liked wrestling, really. So I like my comic books and that kind of thing. I really like music. I like history. I like human origins as well, trying to work out where we came from. Are we a species with amnesia, or do we know what anything? Like I said earlier, I like my aliens and UFO, ufology, or whatever they call it now, and all sorts of things, really. If you email in and say, why not talk about this, even if I don't know about it, I'll have a go. I'll have a little bit of a research and hit the ground running and make a bit of a prat myself. I don't mind that, really. Got a bit of a cocktail here with me today to drink. I just made this just before hitting record. It's called it's called a Dark and Stormy. Dark spice rum, ginger beer, and a squeezed lime. Well, I've only squeezed half a lime in it, but let's taste it, see if it's any good. Oh, it's nice, but it's a bit strong, so I'll give it a bit of a stir. Before we go in properly, I probably should plug the upcoming wrestling show to you guys. Put this down, hang on. That's a bit better now, stirred. It's nice drink that. Okay, so should probably plug the show to you. Next PWL Wrestling Show will be at the end of this month. It's Saturday the 28th of August at 6 o'clock, and it's at the Chuckery Club in Warsaw. I think it's going to be a really good show. We've got I need to stop saying just as we end this and I'll press stop and put it on Facebook, I'll be comfortable, I'll talk properly, and I'll stop saying so yeah, I'll be good in a short while, and then I'll say goodbye. Now the wrestling show, Saturday the 28th of August at the Chocolate Club in Warsaw. Main event is a Survivor Series. We've got myself, Danny Gold, Tiger Singh, Leon Jackson, against the PWL champion Chris Royals, James Venom, Neil O'Reilly, and Dangerous Dave. So we've got a 4-on-4 Survivor Series main event, and then the co-main event, or the semi-main event, whatever they're calling it, is a ladies tag team match, which I'm not 100% sure we've done a ladies tag before. Yeah, I think we maybe have, or maybe two on one. I'm not sure. But this one, it's Elise tagging with a new trainee of hers, Casey, against Jade Knight and Haya. So that's the co-main event, and all the matches are going to be announced real soon. So yeah, Saturday the 28th of August, Chocolate Club in Warsaw. Get in touch on Facebook, or even the email that I've just read out to you, and I'm sure I'll repeat the email a couple of times. You can purchase tickets, but that's going to be good. Have a little drink. I said again. I've got to stop that. So yeah, folks, get in touch. Drop me some questions, and let's, chew the fat and talk about some nonsense. I've got 2 questions here. When I announced that I would be doing a little podcast, I said send some questions in just to give me an idea. And I've got 2. These are actually the first 2 questions that came in. And they're brilliant. So I figured I'd just answer 2 questions today. Call it episode 0, soft open, and see what you guys think. You might say, Matt, that was crap, don't put it on again, and I'll just apologise and won't put it on again then. But let's talk about these questions and what we've got. We've got Nigel, who's emailed in on the old email, which was my Mad Dog one that I just put up just to announce the podcast. But let me just say it again and then I'll stop doing it. RTHPod@hotmail.com. Reversing the hold pod. If you remember it like that, you'll be all right. RTHPod@hotmail.com. But that's the new email to get your questions or your suggestions in, or your subjects or anything like that. And obviously you can get us on Facebook, or the Fan Zone, or the Mad Dog page, or whatever. I'll find your questions, don't worry. But Nigel has emailed and he said, watch me stutter and stammer all over this now. He said, what was it like when you started wrestling 2 decades ago? Training and working shows for Steve Logan. British wrestling was in a very different place back then. World of Sport had been taken off ITV for 13 years. Everyone was into American wrestlers, WWF and the like. There were even tribute shows going around the UK at the time. And what was your experience from wrestling back then? Okay, great question, really interesting, because it was in a different place, really. As you say, you've mentioned in your question, Nigel, British wrestling, or World of Sport wrestling, as it was called, or the show was called anyway, because there was all kinds of sports on. It wasn't just wrestling. Wrestling was just that hour block. Before that, there was things, and it was all varied in different sports. But World of Sport had been taken off the TV, like you say, 13 or 14 years. We didn't have any representation on the television in that sense to advertise the shows and to make stars. And American wrestling at the time, it was the Attitude Era. You had, Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, The Undertaker, Mankind, Kane. You had all that generation of wrestlers, which was ridiculously successful. And yeah, people were crazy over American wrestling. I remember, I don't know whether it still happens now, but I remember going into bars just for a drink, not thinking about wrestling, and Raw would be on in the background, or SmackDown would be on, in proper adult sports bars, and all the kids would talk about wrestling in the playground and all that. Wrestling was big, but like you said, it was American wrestling that was big, really. And what you say, what it was like when I broke in 2000, when I started training, it was a very different place. It was, for me, it was almost 2 worlds, the wrestling at the time. And this is talking only from my experience, really. It was almost like 2 worlds. First of all, you asked about training with Steve and doing stuff. My training with Steve Logan was absolutely phenomenal. I didn't just train under Steve. Steve would bring other people in, or send other people to guide us and whatnot. So it wasn't just Steve, but Steve gave me an amazing start in professional wrestling. I walked into Steve's gym as a 15-year-old kid, and I don't know a lot of things, and I was a bit cocky, and I needed a bit of guidance, and I was a bit naughty. And he gave me a purpose and gave me a path on life that I set down. And 21 years later, I'm still looking over my shoulder, going, "Blimey, has that really happened to me?" I've managed to see the world a couple of times over, and I've met some amazing people, and you know, it's given me a life. So to answer part of your question, what was it like to train and do shows for Steve Logan? Well, I can only speak about those experiences, or the start that he gave me with affection, because I'm the person that I am now because of that training, or that start in life that he kind of gave me. You know, I met my wife kind of through wrestling, and the life that I've got now is because of wrestling. The people I know and the people I love and cherish are largely because of wrestling. So yeah, I owe Steve Logan a hell of a lot, really, you know, and I can only speak affectionately about that. But in regards to Two Worlds, what I'm talking about there is Steve's shows were brilliant, by the way. You know, he would do Sutton Coldfield Town Hall, and he would do Darlaston Town Hall, which I now run. So that's a huge honour for me to be in that building, because I used to put the ring up in that building for him, you know, and then now my ring kind of lives there. So that's pretty cool. He would do these cool shows, and he invariably pretty much always sold out, and there was a great atmosphere. So that I could almost put that as a subject of its own and just say, yeah, it was fantastic. It was hard work. We had to learn the proper way and bump on mats that thin, and it was hard, physically demanding, mentally demanding. It was tough. Weren't all easy and roses, but it's given me what I've got today, so I can only speak brilliantly about that. But the Two Worlds thing that I'm talking about, at the time, and again, I can only talk about my experience, it was almost like there was two standards of wrestling for me, for what I knew. You would do a show, I don't know, say Steve would send us places, you see, I'll go be at this bus stop or this train stop at 11 o'clock on Saturday, and so will pick you up. You'll drive so many hours and you'll do a show or whatever. You know, we would farm us out and try and get us experience and try and get us to be better, really. And we would say go to a show in Stoke, run by Brian Dixon, All-Star Wrestling, and you would sit backstage and we'd be nervous as anything, you know. We're only kids. I was 16, you know, when I started. I was 15 when I started training. I was 16 by the time I'd had my first bout. And we'd say in Stoke for a show for All-Star, and you would have in the corner over there, and this is an actual scenario I'm talking about now. I'm not generalising, I'm talking about an actual experience. You'd have in the corner over there Tony St Clair just reading a newspaper waiting to go on, and he was one of my heroes, like one of the best quality wrestlers of all time, not just British wrestling, and he's in the corner and I can't quite fathom that. I'm staring at him almost, but trying not to stare at him so he doesn't think I'm a stalker. And then you had Klondike Kate over there, and then Robbie Brookside over there, and this wrestler and that wrestler, and just ultimate and absolute professionals, and they were experts in their field. And that was one world, you know, and occasionally some of them would come over and give you some advice or take you under the wing a little bit. That show I was talking about, Tony Sinclair, Klondike Kate, Robbie Brookside, so-and-so, so-and-so, so-and-so. Klondike Kate or Jane took a couple of minutes to come over and talk to a few of us on that. She could tell we were nervous, I think, and we were looking around at the actual star power in the room when we were far anything but stars, really. And I think she could tell we were nervous and a bit out of our league. And she sat with us and she only just spoke to us for probably 5 minutes. She might not even remember this encounter, but it went a long way for us and it taught us a lot. You know, just 5 minutes for someone as professional as Klondike Kate just talking to us. Might have been 5 minutes of her day or 10 minutes of her day, but it made us infinitely better wrestlers, and it was like an education just talking to her for 5 minutes. And Robbie Brookside did similar things as well, because he was good friends with Steve. So when he found out that we were Steve's trainees, he kind of gave us a couple of bits of advice. I mean, he's at NXT now, teaching the stars of tomorrow, as they call them, and all that kind of thing. But he almost took pity on us and gave us some advice, and it was overwhelming, and it was big, and it was insane, and the crowd was sold out, and we did quite a few shows for Brian Dixon at the time, and it was always professionals. And then the second part of it was, you would go to places in Birmingham or just outside of Birmingham, Northampton, and places, you know, all over the country really, and wrestle on shows where there wasn't quite that star power, I suppose. It was on a local level, people just having a go, as you might want to say. And without being insulting to some of them, not all of them, they don't all fall into this bracket, but a lot of them do. They weren't very good shows, you know. It was, for lack of a better term, it was the blind leading the blind, a lot of it really. So it was like two great standards, big divides. And again, this is only my experience. Someone else might not have seen this or not been around this or hold a completely different opinion. But yeah, it was the blind leading the blind, and you know, we'd go from like being the least experienced in the room and knowing absolutely nothing, but the shows were a huge quality and the crowds were massive on the all-star shows and the other professional shows we would do, and we'd learn loads and we'd shut up and do as we're told, and eyes, you know, eyes open, ears open, mouth shut, and all that kind of thing, to go into these other shows where I'm not saying we were the experts or we were best there or anything like that, but we knew how to break fall and we knew the basics and people around us didn't. So it was like a big gulf in standards that we saw, I suppose, or I saw. I can describe that to you. And it was just, it could be a little unsettling at the time. And to answer what you said about the tribute shows, I know they get a lot of stick and they get a lot of insults, and you know, it was like a low point in British wrestling, but at the same time we'd had our stars took off television, and our stars were our advertising, like, you know, the likes of Big Daddy. Sometimes his name would be bigger than the word wrestling on the poster because he was on TV week in, week out in front of millions of people, and he was a household name, so he would draw the crowd. And all of a sudden, our household names were dropping off because we didn't have a weekly advertisement for those household names on ITV anymore. And that's what the wrestling shows are, really. They're an advertisement to sell the live shows. They're not a TV show as per se. And we lost that. So then if you could dress a bloke up as Kane or a bloke up as LOD or a bloke up as Mankind or something like that, and because of that association, and they were called tributes, it said tribute on the poster, and I've been to see tribute Tina Turner and a Beatles tribute. I'm sure you've been to a tribute night, and they're fantastic. And I think British wrestling tributes, it gets a bad name, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying, oh, bring it back and let's do tribute shows or fake shows or anything like that. I'm not saying bring it back or embracing it, but what I am saying is it put people like me who didn't do a tribute, but I was just a wrestler, put people like me in front of 500 and 600 people instead of 20 and 30. You know, I got to wrestle in leisure centres and town halls because there might have been a fake Undertaker on the bill, instead of wrestling in a working men's club instead of in front of 30 people, and it being quite hard work, the blind leading the blind scenario that I spoke about before, you know. So yeah, it's weird because I'm not over glorifying them and saying I'd like the tribute shows to come back, but I'm not insulting them either. There were great wrestlers that would do those tributes. Johnny South, for instance, used to do the Legion of Doom, Hawk, you know, Legend of Doom as they called him, or UKLOD or whatever. And he did it brilliantly, but I won't have anybody insult him because as Johnny South, he was one of the best wrestlers going. And I looked up to him and thought he was brilliant, still do look up to him and think his wrestling's amazing. So it wasn't like just a load of idiots who couldn't do the job, put like, you know, Stone Cold Steve Austin costumes on and rolled about. Some of them were ridiculously talented and qualified veteran wrestlers who were just doing what they had to do or what they wanted to do to make a living. And like I said, what are you going to do? Choose 50 people because you haven't got any stars on, or 500 because you do a tribute? It's weird because I'm not sticking up for it or justifying it, but I'm saying I understand it, and I am saying it got people like me a good start in wrestling because we'd have massive crowds and things like that, really. Double-edged sword, Nigel, the answer to that when you talk about the tribute shows. And one more thing I'd touch on, because you've asked about my experience, and this is the truth now. It was, I'm sorry, I'll swear, but it's true. It was fucking scary. It was scary. You've got to understand that I was a 15, just turned 16-year-old boy. Not you know, I was a boy. You know, you think you were a man when you were 15 or 16. You weren't, you know. You act like you are, or you think you are at the time, but you're not. You're a child. I was a child. And then I found myself in the company of people like Steve Logan, you know, undefeated European Thai boxing champion, or in the company of Drew McDonald, one of the toughest, loveliest but scariest characters ever, or Skull Murphy, who you try and shake his hand and he just death stares you because he's one tough bloke. And I went from, you know, being a kid dreaming of being a wrestler to being a kid around these men. There were men as well then. They were really hard, tattooed, gruff men. And it was a scary world. I'm not going to say nobody overly, you know, there was bullying and there was nastiness, but nothing off the page. I paid my dues and got my head down and paid my dues and did as I was told. I saw some others get it worse than I got it. I'm not going to sit here and say a cry story, a sob story, because it toughened me up, and I'm proud I came through that way. But it was scary. It was scary at times. It was wonderful and brilliant and educational and a future and an opportunity. And there was all good things attached to it, Nigel, but it was bloody scary as well. And I'm not going to shy away from telling you that. It was. If people 15 and 16 now got treated how I got treated when I got into wrestling, people would be sued, and it'd be a big travesty. And people that got into wrestling 20 years before me would look at my in bringing into wrestling as easy, and people that got in 20 years before them would say the same about them. But it was tough, it was hard, and it was scary. But it made me grow up, and there's positives and negatives. But yeah, that's. I think I've answered your question. I'll probably touch on that more as we get the series flowing, and I can talk about that in a bit more depth when we're not clock watching or just doing an intro or event zero or episode zero. I've called this one, but I hope I've answered your question anyway, Nige. And the second one we've got was sent in on Facebook Messenger, which is fine. You can send subjects or questions. It doesn't have to be a question. You can just send me a subject. Matt, can we talk about this? I'll talk about pyramids, the Russian Revolution, the Attitude Era, Stone Cold, Brock Lesnar, Abraham Lincoln. I don't mind. Whatever you're sending, I'll have a go. But this Facebook message from Alex, he's put, it's a funny question, this is, but I kind of want to answer it. I'm almost going to trash the question a little bit at the start, but then answer it properly. It says, Alex Facebook message, if you could go back in time and give 12-year-old Matt any one piece of advice, what would it be? Okay. So if you could go back in time, give 12-year-old Matt, me, any one piece of advice, what would it be? I think that's a really funny question, Alex. I'll get where you're going and what you want. Maybe I'll answer it and say, don't gamble or don't do this or don't do that. But I'm going to answer your question very literally because you've asked it literally. I don't think I would give any advice to myself because I was 12. You said 12-year-old me. I've got a daughter who's not far off 12. I've got a lot of kids, as a lot of you know. But I've got a daughter who's not far off 12, and she's a kid, man. She's a kid. And if I thought that somebody was time travelling, or even just a 36-year-old was trying to give her life advice, I wouldn't like that. I'd kick off. I like how innocent my kid is. She's like, I think she's like 10 and a half, but she's not far off 12. And if someone tried to sit her down and give her life advice that weren't me or a mother, I don't know. I don't know how I'd feel about that, especially some theoretical time traveller, Alex. No, I don't think I'd want to sit down with 12-year-old me and talk. I think that'd freak me out a little bit. I didn't know I wanted to be a wrestler when I was 12, so there's no point me saying, don't do this in wrestling or do this or avoid that show or don't do that, because 12-year-old me would go, oh my God, maybe I won't become a wrestler then because that advice was too full on, or I don't understand it. It might freak a 12-year-old out. You might change your whole life. In trying to change your life in a good way, play these lottery numbers or bet that Germany win the 1996 European Cup or something like that. By doing that, you could ruin your life. I could have been a millionaire at 18 on a bet I could give myself, but I might have drank myself to death when I was 21 or fell off a yacht or something. I think it's a funny question, but the age thing that you said, 12-year-old you, I don't think I'd give myself any advice because I don't think I'd know how to take it at 12. My dad was giving me advice when I was 12, so I'll leave him to it, if that makes sense. Even if you were to say, what about 15 or 16-year-old you, just as I was starting wrestling? Well, the truth is, and I'm probably shouldn't admit it, but I was too big-headed to take advice. I didn't take advice off the people that I should have when I was 15. I'd look back years later and go, oh my God, that advice was amazing. I'm going to stick to that. Or, oh my God, I should have listened to that bit of advice that so-and-so said to me on that show. And a couple of years later, I didn't implement that advice. But I was just, again, at 15, 16, I was a kid. I was a child. I wouldn't have took that advice in. I'm 36 now. I'm ready for advice now. Maybe 57-year-old Matt can time travel now and give me some advice now. I'll take that. I'll be able to take that. Obviously, of course, there's silly things like there would a show where I got hurt or somebody else got hurt or where there was a tragedy on it or a show that was cancelled when I was halfway there. I could time travel then and say, just stay in bed today, Matt. This day won't be worth doing. But I don't think that's what you've said. You spoke about like direct advice. I wasn't ready to take advice at 12 years old, and it wouldn't have gone right. I wasn't ready to take advice when I was 21. So I wouldn't have anything to say to myself, really, because I know that I'd ignore myself. I know me. But like I say, I'm 36 now, and I listen to advice, and I know when to shut up, and I know not to be as big-headed. So to answer your question, maybe 60-year-old me could come and give me some advice now. I'll take it now, Alex. I'll take that advice now. So I've answered your question, but I haven't. But I hope you like that and it makes sense. So yeah, there's my two questions that I've answered, so you can get an idea for what I'm talking about or what I want to achieve with a podcast. But like I say, it doesn't have to be about wrestling. You ask me a question, you set me a subject, and I'll have a go about talking about it. And if you enjoy it, and if you watch it, and you give it a thumbs up, or you let me know you enjoy it, I'll keep doing them. I've said all to 6. So let's do them 6 and have some fun, really. Let me know what you think. And don't forget to email in. Let me see again. RTH, I should know this. RTH, Reversing the Old Podcast. RTHPod, P-O-D. RTHPod at hotmail.com. Send me a message. Send me a question. Send me a subject. Let it be as weird as possible or as conventional as possible. It could be, what did you think of this pay-per-view? What did you think of that wrestler? What did you think of that event? It could be, do you believe in aliens? It could be, what do you think about the royal family? It could be absolutely anything. I'll have a go about talking about it. You have a go at listening to it and let me know what you think, really. Thanks very much. This is Reversing the Hold with Matt Powell and Mod Dog Maxx. Keep in touch. Let's go, folks.